All right, here we go. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the IB Me UBU show, where we discuss all things leadership and success stories. I'm your host, Antoine Valentin, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Dr. Steve Ralph. Steve is the founder of the Epic Impact Society, also the founder and CEO of Open Ingenuity, which is his private practice. Teaching at Pepperdine Graduate Business School, Organizational Theory and Management, which is, of course, where you and I met. And I was one of your students. So super excited again to spend this time with you and learn more about you and your personal journey and obviously your areas of expertise. Steve, is there anything about you that I didn't summarize there that you want to share with people that you think is important to know about you?
No, that was a good start. I'm also the lead trainer for strategic play in the US, so that's another part of my life there. So
So let's start there.
yeah,
Super curious about that. I know I left that out, but obviously, again, a big part of what you've been doing over 5 years now. Strategic play,
mhm,
you're a licensed practitioner in Lego serious play methods. Talk to me
absolutely.
about what that is. I know Legos. I played with them as a kid. I play with them with my kids as well. It
Right.
seems like maybe adults are benefiting from the wonders of Lego as well.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just a wonderful methodology that was created by the Lego company in the 90s. And it's all about taking bricks into the boardroom, so to speak, and looking at challenges using Lego bricks. So we call this 3D thinking. So a lot of times when you have meetings, you'll discuss issues and potential ideas. With Lego Serious Play, you're actually building models to represent ideas. And it goes so deep with a lot of different type of activities and tools. One of the things that's a benefit from this particular process is collaboration among people, storytelling. People are building models and they're sharing their story. People are listening. Um, Diversity of thought is another huge part of it, and a lot of creative thinking, and that's really the lane of everything I do professionally. So I've found that this methodology is something very unique, very disruptive, and really allows for people to think in different ways, which, as you know, is so needed with our very turbulent world. So
Right. Yeah, indeed. So I want to drill down a little bit more on, again, creative thinking, about why that's your passion and when did you know that that was what you wanted to do. But just as a side note, I will mention very, again, small world. I was on a panel discussion with a group of entrepreneurs from Brazil
mhm.
last week. And sure enough, one of them was a licensed practitioner of the Lego series play.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it was just a funny coincidence. And the moment I saw it, of course, I thought of you. Again, just interesting coincidence and how small the world is.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about creative thinking.
Yep.
Now, again, I was your student during the MSML program at Pepperdine. And I know that one of my biggest takeaways from that class was, I think in one of the initial sessions, the question to everyone was, are we creative? And my
Mhm.
initial thought was no, because I was defining creative. I thought of creatives as like artists, musicians, painters, sculptors, and I had none of those skills. But then later I found out you can be creative and not necessarily be an artist. Isn't that right?
100%. Yeah, and actually, I really believe we're all born creative. And um, you look at a lot of the education system, and there's only one right answer, and it breeds this afraid to be wrong, afraid to take a risk and maybe share a different idea. And so I think as adults, we have to regain our creativity. There's a lot of work that's been done in this space that's inspired me in my journey. Sir Ken Robinson is an example. He has a lot of great books that are in this particular topic. But I will say that creative thinking, it's something that I'm really passionate about because I really feel that once people realize their creative potential, watch out. And I think that that's what the work I do is all about, building creative confidence, whether that's in the classroom or in an organization. It's really, how do you create experiences where people have those moments and realize, wow, I am creative. And it doesn't have to be something, a lot of times I find that people, when they talk about innovation, especially, people are
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm not innovative. because they associate that with maybe a lot of the innovators we see in the news quite often, these groundbreaking innovations that change industries, these disruptive innovations. But there is a thing called incremental innovation, which are these small, it could be small adjustments to a product, process, or service. And I think once people kind of understand and wrap their head around, wow, it doesn't have to be the next iPhone discovery. It could be an improvement what we currently have. I think it helps build that confidence.
Yeah, so that's a good call out, because definitely one of the mistakes I also made is when I thought of innovation, I immediately think of technology and products.
Right.
But obviously there are creative solutions we can find for our business problems, whether you're a technology company or not.
Right.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to ask you about also along those lines is, you mentioned we're born sort of creative, and maybe for a variety of reasons, we not able to fully sort of explore or build on that. And we maybe have to come back to it and sort of rediscover it. So can you talk about some of the things, some of the techniques or strategies that you've used in the past and maybe help those that maybe don't believe that they have that creative sort of edge that in
Yeah.
fact we do?
Yeah, I take no matter if it's in the classroom experience designing, for example, the creativity class you took with me, or if it's a workshop experience at an organization, I take a very inside out approach. And what I mean by that is helping people figure out those myths of creativity they may have believed. For example, like you mentioned earlier, that maybe creativity is only artists, right? Or associated with artists. Um, or that you have to have this aha moment, and that's the only way you can be creative, that there aren't tools that you could use, right? So helping people discover those myths or debunk those myths, and then really look at how in moments in the past, where have they felt creative? And really start to dive a little bit deeper into that, where we can figure out how can we have more of those moments. And there's various tools that I have for that. Because I really believe you can't lead others into innovation and creativity unless you can lead yourself first, so you
Mhm.
can understand others. And the other thing is really helping people identify that creativity and innovation are not the same. Creativity is coming up with something novel or new that has value or use, and innovation is the process of putting that creativity into practice or use. So step one, creativity; step two, innovation. And so helping people understand that when, if they're a leader of an organization and they realize, okay, I need more if they're a leader of an organization that needs more innovation, whether a product service, that they have to allow for that creative space to get there, right? So that's a lot of what I think helps. So at that inside out approach is what I try to design in everything I do.
Yeah, so it starts with each individual, but you also mentioned the collaboration required in
Right.
teams, again, to sort of be optimal. So would you say then that obviously, again, you had the individuals within the team, and if even one person maybe isn't really there, it could basically disrupt or maybe prohibit the team from achieving its maximum potential?
Yeah, I think what needs to happen in team experiences is kind of a reset when we talk about creativity and innovation and get a common foundation. That's kind of what I try to encourage teams to do, right? And so a lot of the inside out approach I use individually, I try to use with teams. So you have a foundation to work from, you have a common language. And I think that that's really important. I also use various tools and assessments to help people identify what is their thinking preference or what is their natural kind of lean in when they're trying to solve a challenge that needs a new idea. So that's also different tools in the toolkit. I'm a firm believer in having a big toolkit to pick from, because you never know what kind of group you're going to work with. And so once you have that common foundation, it helps people kind of start to gel together. And especially, I like to infuse this playful fun element and not frivolous at all. It's by design. And so for an example, sometimes bringing out the Lego if I need to, or another tool or process, because there is a bonding that happens when people have those shared experiences where they let their guard down. It starts to help build trust. And trust is foundational for anything we're talking about with creativity and innovation with teams, because if people do not have trust, they're not going to be willing to take the risk to share a new idea. So that investment of time is really critical.
Indeed. And another aspect of trust is overcoming the fear of failure, right? I mean, as I understand, there are some folks that think that success is just a straight line up like a rocket ship. But the reality is there's oftentimes many iterations and sort of failures that we learn from to finally get to success. So can you talk a little bit about sort of not just overcoming the fear of failure, but embracing it as part of the creative and innovation process?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I mean, that, as you mentioned, is a real key there. I mean, if people are kind of paralyzed with that fear of failure, they're not going to want to step out and share ideas. They'll feel maybe it's a stupid idea, or what if this happens? And so, I actually like to dive into it in workshop experiences. I have a few activities where I celebrate failure in a fun, safe environment, and people start to realize, you know what? After those kind of experiences, it's okay. They understand it's. If you look at the innovators out there throughout history, right? There is this element where they tried and maybe they failed and they got back up and tried again, and it's that resilience is really key when we talk about innovation. So. Um, yeah, and I think that if you're, in any type of facilitator role, whether that's in the classroom or in a company, in a workshop, I think it's important that that's part of that foundation lane, because it
Mm,
really just kind of resets, sets the tone, because we come in, every person comes in with their own experiences, with how they approach failure. For some, it could be like, yeah, okay, I failed. Others, it could be devastating, right? So it's really, you have to set that foundation.
indeed. So talk to me about the Epic Impact Society. You started it over 5 years ago.
Yep. Yeah, so this is a huge passion of mine. It kind of birthed out of my doctoral program in my degrees in organizational leadership. At that time, I was going to various conferences, a lot of creativity conferences, especially, and loved them, a lot of great things. But I felt like there was something missing on the West Coast, one. Two, in my research, I was really looking at the importance of environment. So I was wanting something in a retreat type of environment and how that impacts creative thinking. And the other element was a lot of my research looked at the dynamic of information overload and how that impacts our creative thinking. So that basically is kind of the catalyst of where I wanted to kind of go with it. And we had our first event in 2019. And it was a wonderful team of people that some I've worked with for many years in different projects, and some at that time more of a recent engagement. And we had our first summit, and the whole kind of concept around it is to foster creative leadership, and to do that using what I basically is cross-pollination. So we brought in international thought leaders, educators, executives, artists, and we had a 3-day experience where I did a little experiment when people were registering, and I asked the question, would you be willing to disconnect from your devices for 3 days? And I thought maybe 50% would want to, but it turned out 100% wanted to. So then I went to the workshop leaders, and there's about 20 at that time. I said, here's who's coming. Would you be willing to unplug, no audio visual? And for the most part, everybody said yes. One person was like, okay, this is a creative challenge. And it turned out great. And the survey results showed that people felt they were more present, they weren't distracted. It helped really foster that creative experience. And in that particular event, at lunch, I had this moment where I stood up and I looked to my left, and I saw a university dean having lunch with a NASA engineer and an actor. And I thought, not many conferences get that kind of mix, right? And I realized that Epic kind of created a life of its own at that point, because the actual first summit, it originally came out of my practice, my own practice. So at that time, after the first summit, we created a nonprofit, the Epic Impact Society. And so we've been having various summits since. And we're very excited for this one coming up in September. So,
Right. So interesting timing. As you started in 2019, I'm assuming just before the pandemic and sort of lockdowns. And I'm assuming that probably had an impact on subsequent summits that you had. Were they always in person, or did you have to do some virtual?
yeah, so yeah, very interesting timing. So yeah, we had the first one in January 19, right? So that's pre-summit.
Sure.
We planned our second one March 2020. We were 2 weeks away. And like all of us, the world stopped in a lot of respects. So we postponed it thinking, oh, it's just going to be a few months, right? Not. And then we and it moved it. And then we finally designed it in a way to be virtual that ended up in 2021, where we had a lot of different moments for people to pause and disconnect to, we call them pause prompts, to go out and find ways to take with what they were learning online in an unplugged environment. Then we went back face to face this last year in April, and so we're back on track. Another face to face. It really is a face to face experience. We still encourage the disconnect pledge, but we also have, if people need to use their devices, there is a tech zone. It's kind of like at the end of the property, and so, but it's still allowed. But it's more of, we're not anti-tech. It's more of providing the space for people to reflect on whether they're managing their devices or their devices managing them, because there is a connection there when people, and again, it's not anti-tech because technology is amazing, but when we get to a point as humans, we get overwhelmed with the information coming at us, and that's information overload. That's really the issue. And then we actually downshift to the part of the brain where we're not in our creative space.
Mm.
So that's what we're trying to encourage is people, a moment, a space for 3 days to pause, because EPIC's an acronym. It stands for experiential learning, pause, ingenuity, and community engagement. So we have this pause element. Okay, let's pause from our devices. Let's pause from information overload and connect with each other, and then also inspire creative thinking. So,
It sounds like an amazing event. And you said the next one is in September in Santa Barbara. And people that are interested in learning more and possibly attending should go to the Epic Impact Society website, correct?
correct. You could go epicimpactsociety.org or epicsummit.com. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make sure I put links to all this in the meeting notes. So you talked about how it was spawned sort of from your practice. So again, that's Open Ingenuity, your own practice that you've had for almost 7 years. So talk to me about that and what made you finally decide to sort of do your own thing.
Yeah, yeah. My doctoral program is transformational in a lot of ways. I realized I knew going in there, I wanted to focus on creativity. So day one of applying, I knew I wanted to dive in this area, and I wanted to help individuals and organizations figure out how to foster creative thinking, because even at that time, the world was changing at a rapid pace. And I kept hearing from various, especially HR directors and their companies, that wrestling with all the changes and how to prepare their employees. And I thought when I graduated, then I would start, but actually in the program, I started to be invited to do these various engagements and workshops and such. So immediately following, in 2018, I launched Open Ingenuity. And in that, it's really focused on creating experiences to help foster creative thinking. It's interesting, the World Economic Forum, they put the Future of Jobs reports that go out every so often. The last one was in May 2023. And they basically identified that one of the top skills that are going to be growing and increasing in demand is creative thinking. And I look at that, and that's really a lot of what also confirms and drives my passion to do this, is because people need to approach challenges in different ways. We can't do the same thing to solve the challenges that are coming around the corner. And so that's a lot of what Open Ingenuity does. So various workshops, it could be 2-hour workshop, it could be half day, whole day, boot camp, multiple day offsite retreats. And I use a lot of various tools and methodologies to do that. Some of those you've experienced in the class, but expand it out. And I really find that people, one, discover more about themselves and the strengths they bring and the unique thinking that they bring to the team. But then also I find that organizations and teams figure out, wow, as a team, what the possibilities of what could be if we applied various tools and innovative approaches. So
I see. Um, and I'm just out of curiosity, I'm assuming you've worked with a lot of people over the years, and you're probably typically brought in by maybe one or two individuals, but then you're facilitating a session for a larger group, I assume. How do you help overcome? I know I was one of these people at times in my past where I didn't see the value in things like this. I thought there wasn't enough time in the day, this, rah rah kumbaya type of session. Let's just get back to work. What do you say to people like that maybe haven't gotten to that place yet where they're open to learning and maybe experiencing something that might seem like a waste of time at first, but actually will end up paying tremendous dividends down the road if they just open themselves to it?
yeah, it depends, because there's a variety of different industries I work with. So I really take a case by case depending on who I'm talking with. Is it an advertising firm or is it healthcare or whatever that may be? So some people might be more comfortable with one tool or methodology or approach than another. So I really try to be sensitive to who I'm talking with, and the comfortability level. But I will say that I like to just start the workshops diving in a sense. So I'll do fun kind of opener activities. The power is in the debrief. The power is what did they just experience? And usually that's what I find people that had some hesitations, they start to realize that. So that again, it's customized depending on the organization. But I think that one, people experiencing a short something at the beginning to hook them and understand the value in growing in your creative thinking. Why? I mean, I like to give examples of organizations that have adopted a creative mindset and the outcome versus those that have not. And some are well-known organizations throughout, history, and some are more current. So that's kind of my initial approach with that.
Got it. So talk to me about Pepperdine. You've been there for over 8 years now. Such a special place. When did you know that Pepperdine is where you wanted to be? Talk to me about sort of how you got started there and
Yeah.
what keeps you there after all these years.
So I guess you could say I really love Pepperdine because I went there as an undergrad. So I went to Seaver College. Had just obviously a huge transformational experience as an undergrad. Came on board actually doing corporate relations for the business school and the Graduate School of Education and Psychology for a period of time, right before my doctorate and a little bit during. And with the goal, and I got, obviously my bachelor's degree there, but my doctorate as well. So, I like the school. And then I dove into, I always wanted to teach and then have my own practice and projects as well. So when dove in 8 years ago, teaching the creativity class, and then I just loved the environment, and it worked out for me to jump on board full time. So, and Pepperdine, as you know, is such a special place. The culture there, I call it the Pepperdine effect. You join, and you're not just another number. You build these relationships with each other as students, and then also with faculty and staff. So the culture is what keeps me. And teaching the creativity class it never gets old for me. It never gets boring, especially in that topic. And seeing the transformation from week 1 to week 14 at the end of the semester, and the growth and what people want to do with the various tools they learn is just, it's just so rewarding. In addition to the other classes I teach as well. But I love the culture there and the purpose, service, and leadership mission. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so did I. And for what it's worth, my oldest son is starting his junior year in high school, and we're hoping that in a couple of years when he graduates that he's
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
for sure. Talk to me about, you mentioned books earlier. Are there any books that sort of stand out to you as maybe ones that you would recommend for anyone that wants to explore their creativity? outside of, again, taking a formal course or participating in a workshop, maybe some books that they could start with?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think if somebody's kind of starting out in this field and wanting to explore more, um, The Myths of Creativity by David Burkus is great. It kind of talks about, like I mentioned earlier, some of the myths that hold us back from our creative potential. I mentioned Sir Ken Robinson. He has a book called Out of Our Minds, which looks at the influence of, the education system and how that impacts us as adults as far as creative thinking. You had one of the books in our class, The Innovator's DNA, which is great. That's based on, I think it's 8 years of research looking at executives and innovators and what are some skills that they all had in common and how we can all grow in those. There's also another book. I think it's great. Kind of one of the things I tell the students, as you know, is that with all the changes happening, the exponential change and the growth of technology, we have to think that way as well. We have to think about what is coming around the corner and how that may impact us in our industry. So books that look at that particular topic. Gerard Leonhard, he's a futurist. He has a book, Technology versus Humanity, that's intriguing. And so, just I think those are the ones I would initially recommend. But I would say if somebody's starting out in the field, definitely The Myths of Creativity probably first.
Got it. And talking about, again, the technology, obviously, again, has helped bring us together in many ways. Obviously, we can communicate with someone on the other side of the globe easily. But as much as it's connected us, we also oftentimes feel disconnected from the people sitting in the same room with us, perhaps. Can you talk to me about sort of how do we strive to strike a balance where we embrace technology because it is part of how sort of we operate these days, for better, for worse. But at the same time, we don't want to lose our humanity and that sort of personal interaction and that magic that you experience when you're, building a relationship with someone, and the creativity, obviously, that can spawn from being in person, working together. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say, it really is a balance. And it comes down to, as an individual, I think it's having a healthy self-awareness. I talked about how Epic has that pause, right? Disconnect pledge. Personally, people need to have moments to do that, where they pause for a while and really reflect on their relationship with technology. I mean, how often do you go to restaurants and entire families are only on their phone? They're not engaging, right? You see that in a lot of environments. It's easy to fall into that, right? It's all for all of us, myself included. So it's really trying to have those moments where we just unplug, we step away, and just, it doesn't have to be this long all day thing, but it just moment, like, where am I at, right? How am I investing in the relationships in my family and friends, and how I approach my business? Is there opportunities to meet in person versus online? Obviously, there's great, like what we're doing here, it's great to use technology for this and wonderful ways to connect. But I do think, and this is something I've been chewing on quite a bit over the last year or two, is, we talk about disruptive innovation, and when we talk about that, we think of a lot of people in tech, right? We think of the, big names in tech. However, disruption means going against the flow, right? If we move into a more tech saturated world, will a disruptive leader of the future be somebody that shows more of the human effect? Because that would be going against the flow, right? And so as leaders, I think it's really critical to think how to really have those moments of looking at how are we fostering the human connection. There's a lot of exciting things happening in technology, but are we jumping all in and forgetting the human element? Because that's, I think, really going to be a disruptive component that would help you as any leader of any organization really stand out, right? And not losing that. I mean, how often do we call a number and we want to talk to a human and we have to go through, I had that today, like 20 prompts, and I just want to talk to somebody. So, I mean, you have those moments. And so I think it's something leaders need to be self-aware of. So.
I agree with you 100%, and I can relate because I grew up in a time before the internet and technology. But now, final question before we run out of time is, what how do you apply though this sort of mentality to Gen Z that has grown up only with technology, have been on phones since very, very young age, devices, etc., and maybe don't even see the value in sort of that human connection and feel more comfortable communicating, interacting with technology?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a whole nother conversation that we could dive into, but I will say that I think it's a responsibility for leaders of organizations currently and families and parents to really strike that balance. Again, not anti-tech, but the critical importance of human connection. There's some interesting data coming out, with college kids where they were looking at, the device usage, right? And I think that there is a need, there is a desire for more human connection. So we'll see. We're going into uncharted territory, but again, having that mindset of looking what's around the corner, I think, is really important so that we can navigate all these changes coming.
I'm with you, and I for one hope that we never lose that personal human connection. And while again taking advantage of technology, but certainly embracing sort of a balance, a healthy balance. Steve, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate taking the time to chat with me. Again, I know you're super busy, so I'm super grateful. But I wanted to close by just giving you a personal thanks. I learned a lot from you during the course that you taught. And I've been applying the lessons ever since last August when I walked. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward to part 2 at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I think it's wonderful you're doing this. Thank you, Antoine.
Thanks, Steve.